Hello YouTube! If you're confused by this title, it means that you're one of the lucky few who is out of the loop of social media, because you haven't been yet exposed to the viral question that is dividing men and women on the internet. The question is the following. Between a strange man and a bear, who would you rather be stuck in a forest with? That question was originally asked to 10 women, and out of the 10, 9 answered the bear. And naturally, this attracted a lot of attention because it appears entirely illogical. Why would you prefer to be stuck in a forest with an apex predator instead of a man? That makes no sense whatsoever. At least it doesn't from the male perspective, which is why so many men were apparently extremely angered by this question and its answer because they perceived it as just another feminist attempt at presenting men as monsters, in a sense, in a way to shit on us, to put the blame on us, and to present us in a degrading light. And I perfectly understand this reaction because this all sounds very unjust. You and I are not bears. We, I hope, never hurt any women, and so this just looks like we're being targeted even though we did nothing to deserve it. But the part that I want to insist on is the fact that outside of the 10 women that were asked that question originally, the vast majority of women on social media also aligned themselves with that answer, meaning that the majority of female kind seems to prefer being stuck in a forest with a bear over a man. And this means something. It means that there is a disconnect in the perspective because every single woman perfectly understands this choice and every single man fails to. And that is a gap. And this is that type of gap that I personally attempt to bridge. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I talk about masculinity and femininity often because to me, the two need to be together. The two, in a sense, complete one another. And to attempt a reconciliation, we first must understand one another, which is why when I saw that new viral theme, I knew that I had to make a video about it because it is that very divorce that I'm witnessing here. The fact that men cannot understand the way women think about us, the way they perceive us. But to do that, I'm going to have to relinquish my male perspective. We're going to have to put ourselves in women's shoes today because if we are to understand why they make that choice, why they prefer the bear over us, this is an absolute necessity. If we stay stuck in our perspective, we're just going to stay mad forever and we'll never be able to understand why. So if you are a guy who was angered by this trend and who couldn't understand why you were placed higher than a predator on the lethality list of a woman, this video is for you. You are the type of person I made this video for. I don't think you're a bad person. I just think that you need an extra dimension to your perspective to help you understand the way women think and the way they function. Now, I'm a male, so I don't claim to understand it 100%, but I think that I did enough research with this video and my daily life in general to be of great help to you. So my goal today is going to be to answer the following question. Why would women pick the bear? And to start, I first have to inject a bunch of statistics into the discussion because they're going to be needed for the rest of the discussion. Oftentimes, when women bring up concerns about their safeties, they're essentially dismissed for being emotional. The same type of people who say that will always love to use the phrase, facts don't care about your feelings. Great, we're going to start with a bunch of facts, and the hardest of facts are statistics. So, if we look at the choice that women make, of women justify their choice of bear over man by stating rightfully that women get killed more often by men than by bears, which is true, it is correct. And you might even have heard that the number one cause of mortality for women is men. And this is where I have to put a stop to the myth that is absolutely untrue. It's something that is brought about a ton. If you look at the top 10 reasons why women die in the West at least, murder by a fellow man is not even on the list. It's not even in the top 50 or the top 100. The top 10 lethality mortality reasons for women is always health related. So you have, for example, stuff like health issues, heart attacks, that tends to be top one. You have things like cancer, like Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, and accidental accidents. more women die in car crashes or in their houses, sleeping on the stairs, than killed by their husbands, which by the way, is great. I'm not saying it's somehow a myth-busting attempt that I'm doing here to show that women exaggerate the violence inflicted to them. I'm just saying that it is not what kills the most women every single year. And to give you a broad idea, if you need hard numbers to understand this reality, in 2020, 300,000 women died of heart disease, roughly 1 in 5 deaths. And for the same year, only 10,000 died in car accidents. That's already a big divide. Then if we look at murder, only 3,000 women died of murder. So that is roughly 1 in 500 deaths. So this is just to again put this all into perspective. That being said, it doesn't change the fact that indeed when women get murdered, it is almost always at the hands of a man. Female on female murder is extremely rare. In the US, for example, if you look at the totality of murders, men commit 80% of all homicides. And when you look at femicides, the action of killing a woman, 9 out of 10 times the culprit is a man. But not just any man. 90% of women who get murdered get killed by a man that they know. So it's someone in their lives. And 60% of these 90% of cases is by their boyfriend or their husband directly. And that is something that I want you to keep in mind. When women get killed by men, they get killed by men that they know. On the flip side, for men, it's the exact opposite. Men are much more likely to get killed by a complete stranger. And only 5% of men get murdered by their girlfriend or their wives. That being said, if you are into statistics, you know that overall, men still do get murdered at a much higher rate. Worldwide, if you take every single country into account, 80% of all murders concern a male victim. In the US, in I think 2022, 50,000 men were murdered for only 4,000 women. So if you are a male, you are at a much higher risk of being targeted and killed. That is also true. But the one thing that I want you to keep in mind is that in both cases, male or female, if you get killed, the person that kills you is very likely to be a man. So while murder is of course an unlikely way to die, if it happens to you, it will most likely because you have crossed the path of the wrong dude. Which shows that in the world, in the globality of the planet, men have a monopoly on violence. In comparison, if we look at bear attacks, roughly 1 to 6 people get killed each year by a bear in North America alone. And that's even exaggerated. Sometimes not even a single person gets killed for a full year. So statistically, if you are a woman, you are of course much more likely to be killed by a man because being killed by a bear is almost impossible. So if you ask a woman who is aware of these statistics, which one do you pick, the man or the bear? Statistically speaking, if she answers the bear, she is stupid because the man is much more likely to kill her. But that is only if we look at statistics as hard numbers and we don't understand the context that surrounds it. Many of you, I'm certain, are going to point out in the comments that this only works and these numbers are only true because bears don't live close to us. The reason why they don't kill that many people is because we tend to leave them alone. Most of the time when someone gets mauled or eaten by a bear, it's a bear that started to move closer to human habitation, or some idiot who went backpacking far away from civilization and ended up on the menu because he couldn't defend himself. This means that if tomorrow the bear population skyrocketed and they started to move in the suburbs, most likely the number of bear attacks and people dying because of that would also skyrocket. And it's important to point out because, well, yes, a woman will never be killed by a bear. That is mostly because she lives in the city or away from them. But if I plug her in the situation where she's stuck in the forest with one, now your chance of dying of bear attack is much, much higher. It's the exact same thing with shark attacks. Why are shark attacks so low? Because sharks live in the ocean and you don't. But if you started spending 24 hours a day in a tank with sharks, most likely you would eventually get attacked and killed. It's important to bring these numbers to perspective. Yes, bears only kill one person a year. It doesn't mean that they're not going to kill you if they get the chance. And I'm certain that the women who answered that poll would perfectly be able to make the distinction if after that question they were told, okay, you have made your choice, now we're going to put you in a forest with a bear. I think that many women would be like, whoa, 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 I take that back, I pick the man, because now the scenario is not just an hypothetical, it's reality. And when reality starts to knock on the door, you most likely will go with the scenario that you can handle more or less, a man instead of a bear that you have never really been in contact with. So while technically you know that it's not going to kill you because statistically it shouldn't, it still very well can. These are the types of rebuttals that I'm certain you have heard men provide and produce to try and explain why the women who pick bear are actually idiots. And while these men are not necessarily incorrect, the problem is that they look at the problem from a purely logical and statistical perspective, which means that they unfortunately ignore the main point of contention that makes women pick the bear. The fact that in their day-to-day lives, women don't live with bears, but they live with us. And so the reality of violence is much more potent and pregnant when it comes to a man because, while the majority of women can tell you stories about being victimized by a man, almost no woman has a story of being victimized by a bear. And this is what I want us to focus on, the experience that women have with us. Because in reality, the man or bear question is just an excuse for women to express the way they truly feel about us. So in a sense, you could take the bear out of the equation and it wouldn't matter. The bear is just there to serve as a point of comparison between what should logically be the choice that you never make and the choice that you should make, which is man, and the one that every single woman more or less refuses to make. Which points to an underlying fear of men that is so strong that between an actual apex predator and us, women would rather deal with the bear. Because to them, since they live with us and not the bear, the apex predator is us. And that is perfectly reasonable because if you look at the grand scheme of things and the food chain, we are the ones that compete with the women, we are the ones in contact with them, and so we are the greatest danger to their survival. And if as a man you get upset when you hear stuff like this, you need to get over yourself. It's a reaction that I've personally had to deal with a lot when I discuss the reality of violence. You have dudes who come out of the woodwork, no pun intended, and who try to spun that notion that men are not that dangerous, that men and women, when it comes to violence, are more or less equal, and that it somehow is unjust, unfair to point out the finger at men and to blame them for the majority of violence. Which is ironical because this tends to come from the same people who say facts don't care about your feelings. Well, in this case, I'm going to cite the introduction by the great Gavin de Becker to make you understand that indeed in this situation, facts really don't care about your feelings. Quote, "Men of all ages and in all parts of the world are more violent than women. For this reason, the language in this book is mostly gender specific to men. When it comes to violence, women can proudly relinquish recognition in the language because here at least, politically correct would be statistically incorrect." If you look at every single country on earth, the people that kill, rape, and steal tend to be men. If you're not happy with that, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not saying that you as a man is a bad person, I'm saying that us as males have a propensity for violence, and it's impossible to deny that. Which also means that we are also more exposed to violence, because as I explained, we also get killed more often, but in a sense that is Talien's law, an eye for an eye. We kill the most, we produce the most violence, and so it also impacts us the most. And as a result, naturally, we also have a tough time understanding the reality of this violence when it comes from the perspective of someone who doesn't have that monopoly, of someone who is a spectator to it. And that is most women, because most women don't produce that violence, but they still receive it. Less than us, but they're still on the receiving end of a ton of it, none of which they personally produce. So that is the difference between men and women. Men get killed by other men, women get killed by men. And of course that doesn't mean that women don't have a capacity for violence. If you have functioning limbs, you can be violent. What I mean instead is that their propensity for violence, their tendency to engage in it, is much lower than ours, first and foremost, and also that their efficiency when they engage is also much lower simply because they're weaker. So not only do they get violent less often, but when they do get violent, they don't create much damage. Whereas men get violent more often, and when they do, they break shit and they kill people. If you deny this reality as a man, this means that you're essentially claiming to be no more dangerous than a woman. And we both know that this is bullshit. Both on a statistical and biological level, it makes no sense. And again, I don't say that to put the blame on men. I'm a man myself. I'm just recognizing a reality here. Once that is recognized and we establish that this is the basis of our discussion, we have to move on to the following question, because even though we are more dangerous than women, does it make us more dangerous than a bear, and does it justify a woman preferring to spend the night in a forest with a bear over spending that night with us? So let's look again at the terms I just used. Capacity, propensity, and proficiency, or efficiency, whichever you want to go with. Are bears capable of violence? Yes, absolutely. Are bears efficient with violence? Yes, much more than you. Why? Because a bear is stronger than you. So if both you and a bear attacked a woman, most likely if this simulation was repeated 100 times, you would kill the woman less often than the bear does. Which should mean that women would be better off picking the man over the bear. But that is leaving the third criteria of violence, which is propensity. How willing is the bear to inflict pain and suffering and death onto a woman, and how willing is the man? Well, many women rightfully identified the fact that men, human males, have a much higher propensity for violence towards human female compared to a bear. Because the only reason why a bear would go after you as a human is if it's hungry or trying to chase you out of its territory. If it's hungry, the fact that it's going after you is already insane and rare because that almost never happens. Which is the reason why people tell you if you get attacked by a grizzly bear to play dead, because most likely that bear is not going to be interested in hitting you at all. So the motivation that would push the bear to be aggressive towards you is simply not present. But we cannot say the same for human males. Human males go after human females at a much higher rate for a simple reason. The thing that motivates that action and that aggression is not food. It's also a primal drive, but in this case, it's not hunger, it's sex. It is the fact that men are sexually attracted to women that makes us so dangerous to them, because this is what motivates the majority of our interactions, especially if these interactions are predatory in nature. And unlike a bear, that is a reality that as a woman you cannot escape. Because if you're in a forest and you know there is a bear, you can do plenty of things to make sure that the bear never finds you or never actually wants to interact with you. You can just not carry food that should get you out of most dangerous situations or scenario. You can make a lot of noise, all things that will prevent the reality of that violence of happening to you. But in that same scenario, if the predator is a man, none of these methods are going to work. Simply because in that scenario, sadly, you are the food. You are a walking buffet. And so it is now your existence, your very existence as a female that motivates the attack. And you cannot not exist. I hope that even if you have a bone to pick with women, you're going to give them that. That they're not going to stop existing simply to avoid being attacked. That is not reasonable. But it doesn't stop there. If it did, it would be great. There's actually an added factor that makes men much more dangerous than bears in this scenario, and that is the fact that bears don't have emotions attached to whether or not they manage to get what they want from you. If you get attacked by a bear and it's not set on killing you and you have no food on you, the bear is not going to take revenge by just decapitating your neck and moving on. But if you do that to a man, if you turn down a man when he asks for sexual favors, chances are he's not just going to turn back and go home. He's most likely going to either attack you or he's going to follow you. You know what he wants. Because when a random guy strikes a conversation with a random girl, it's rarely to talk about the weather. You know his motivations, but you don't know how far he's willing to go to fulfill that urge. Which explains why so many women have this very cold demeanor in public, because every woman will tell you that One time they were nice and they smiled and they were kind when a guy approached them. That guy took it as a sign that she was open for sex. And then when she turned him down, he started getting mad because he thought she was leading him on, which can lead to the guy following you home, threatening to kill you, or even attacking you in public. And naturally, no woman wants to have to deal with this. So the next time a guy is going to approach that same woman, she is going to be cold, she's going to ignore him. But hey, that also doesn't work because now you gave the guy a reason to be mad. How dare you ignore him? How dare you not give him the time of day? So now he calls you a stuck-up bitch, and guess what? He also follows you home. As many women rightfully pointed out, a bear would never behave like this. And I know that this reality is something that many men are completely unaware of because it never happens to us. If someone comes up to me on the street and hits on me and I turn them down, they're not going to follow me home. They're not going to try and attack me because I'm a man. They know that there is a risk involved in trying to start shit with me, but the same is not true for women because women are physically weaker. And granted, women are also physically weaker than bears, but it's the psychology of that difference that matters here. Human men are aware of their superiority, so they know they can muscle their way to whatever they want if they're dealing with a woman. And it is that difference in strength that means that men are going to allow themselves behaviors that they would never entertain, for example, with another man. The reason it's so important to understand this is because it mostly explains why a woman would pick a bear over a man. Unlike the man, the bear is very predictable. And in most scenarios, it's going to leave you alone. Whereas for a man, in most scenarios, it's not going to leave you alone. So as a defense mechanism, women go out of their way to treat every single man as a predator because to them, there is absolutely no way to know and to distinguish between dudes. I'm certain that you as a man might have been turned on by a woman one day and you thought, oh, that's so unfair, I'm a nice guy. Yeah, maybe you are a nice guy, but she can't know that. Because unlike the bear, you don't carry your intentions on your face. The bear is a bear. It's not wearing the costume of a sheep to gain the trust of the woman and then eat her. But dudes do that. Dudes wear masks. That is the psychological aspects that makes us so dangerous. Unlike the bear, we can trick women. And for a woman, the consequences of getting tricked tend to be extremely severe. So, as a way to protect themselves, they don't even play the game and they don't even engage. That is why they pick the bear. If you don't pick the man, you don't even have to entertain or interact with the man. And so, in a sense, you stay safe. The consequences of an heterosexual encounter going wrong tend to be much more severe for women than for men. And so, unsurprisingly, women tend to be much more wary of men than men are wary of women. This is the asymmetrical nature of the reality of violence when it comes to romance for both sexes. And it's important to understand that as a dude, because if a woman goes out of her way to go on a date with you and you're alone with her, this means that she trusts you to a certain degree because she opens herself up to whatever you might do to her. You can literally do whatever you want to her. You have that physical capacity. You might not want to, but she doesn't know that. And actually, I didn't write that in my notes, but I have a little story to tell you that. I have a bunch of stories in this episode so that it contextualizes everything I talk about because I don't want it to just remain theoretical. When I was in college, second year, I think, I started to flirt with a girl that I liked a lot. And with things going forward, I started to seduce her a bit, and eventually, she invited me to her place. But before she did so, she wanted to meet me in a public space to have a discussion. And I didn't quite understand why, because I was like, well, why don't we just go to your place and talk there? But she insisted, and so I just accepted, and I went there. And in that discussion, she essentially told me that she had just broken up with a boyfriend, she wasn't ready yet, she liked me, but she didn't want to do anything serious yet. And it was very important for her that I knew that going forward because she didn't want me to feel tricked. That was very nice of her. But the part I didn't understand was, why in public? And then it clicked. The reason why she wanted to have people around is because she wasn't certain about my reaction. Many men, when they get rejected like this, get angry and they get violent, And she had that happen to her before. So this time she was prepared. If I had a bad reaction to this, to that encounter, to that conversation, she would be safe. But if she had made the mistake of allowing this conversation to take place in her apartment with only the two of us, she would be stuck in an empty apartment with no one around, with someone who is potentially dangerous. That is the type of mechanisms that women put in place to protect themselves from us. Could I get upset at this and say, well, I would never do that? Yeah, if I was a twat. But now, being older, I understand that she did what she had to do to protect herself and to, in a sense, take care of her own safety, which is something that women are responsible for. No one else is going to take that responsibility away from them. And if they fail to fulfill that responsibility, society blames them. And we tell them, hey, you fucked up, you did this, so this is why you got attacked. Next time, do better. When women do better, they also get attacked, because apparently they're stuck-up bitches. So they can't win, which explains why the frustration builds up, and when things like this occur, when questions like this come to the forefront and become viral, women let loose. They finally expose all of the things that they kept hidden inside, because this time they have numbers with them, so they're not going to be shot on as violently per se. So that was a little anecdote to make you understand the asymmetrical nature of violence between men and women. And just as a fun fact, for the research I did for this video, I found out that gay couples, so two men, have the highest percentage of inner couple murder. Isn't that interesting? When you put two bears together, pun not intended, the chances of one of them killing the other is higher. I wonder why. Is it maybe because men are more violent than women? Guess who the lowest percentage of murder per couple is? Lesbians. Why? Because you put two women together, they're not going to kill each other. It's as simple as this. Moving forward, so, as I said, if you're a man, you probably can't understand all of what I just explained to you. Even with this anecdote, you might still be on the back foot thinking that this is not real, you're exaggerating, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do instead is, I'm going to paint a scenario, an hypothetical scenario, to make you understand what it feels like to be a woman. And this is just going to be a thought experiment. You don't have to live through it. But I'm going to ask you to actually make an effort to project yourself in the world, in the fictional world I'm going to paint for you, because in that world, you're going to become prey. So here's what I want you to do. The thought experiment is as follows. You're going to imagine that tomorrow a new sex is going to appear, a third sex. They are also humans, they're not monsters or bears, they are capable of reason, okay? Just like you and I. But they're much bigger than you, meaning that the difference of strength and size between a man and a woman is the same between men and that third gender, meaning that the majority of them are from 4 to 8 inches taller than you, and not only that, they're also much heavier, much more muscular. So in a sense, let's say you're a dude and you're 6 feet, the average individual from that sex, from that new sex, is going to be roughly 6'7", around that ballpark, and roughly 250 to 80 body weight, pure muscle, okay? I insist on pure muscle because with that difference in weight comes a difference in strength. These beings are just as strong as you are compared to a woman. So the difference in strength is the exact same, meaning that you cannot defend yourself against them. They can manhandle you easily. Even if you come across one that is the exact same stats as you, same height, same body weight, which will be rare, that person is still stronger than you by far. By metrics you can barely imagine, okay? That is your new reality. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and these people are everywhere. In every public space, they go to the same supermarkets as you, they live in the same buildings. Would you feel comfortable around these people? And if I asked you, hey, do you want to be stuck in a forest with a bear or with one of these dudes, would you still pick the bear? Let me add another factor, because this is still not enough. We are still very far away from what women have to deal with men. On top of all of that, I'm also going to add the fact that these dudes, I say dudes, they don't have a name. If you have a name for them in the comments, let me know. That third sex is sexually attracted to you. Meaning that their sex drives them towards you, men. They only like males and they want to fuck you. That's what they want to do. Let me ask the question again. would you feel comfortable living around these people? Would you trust them? If tomorrow you had to take the elevator with one of these, would you feel safe? If your answer is yes, you're an idiot. You should not feel safe because the asymmetry in strength also will create an asymmetry in violence, and most likely, if violence occurs, you will become the victim and you will not be able to defend yourself. The reason why I like this thought experiment so much is because it really puts into perspective how insane it is that women somehow still trust us enough to go on dates with us and be alone with us. If that third sex existed, I would not want to be stuck alone with one of these people. It's way too dangerous. And I actually have another anecdote to make you understand how it would feel to be in that position. But in that scenario, I am that creature. I am the third sex. So this happened to me a while ago. I was in college, I think in France, and I was coming home from a party, and it was 3 a.m. And when I entered the hall of my building, I found out that my neighbor was there, and she was a girl around my age, maybe like 2 or 3 years older. And when I closed the door behind me, she turned because she heard the noise. And the look on her face was pure terror. She was horrified, to the point that actually I remember back then I turned around and I looked behind me because I thought, oh, did someone follow me? Did a bad guy follow me into the building? Why is she looking so scared? But there was no one behind me. And so I realized in that moment that the reason why she was afraid was me. And at first I was puzzled. I was like, why would you be afraid of me? That makes no sense whatsoever. I'm not dangerous. But then it clicked. The reason why she was so afraid is because I was indeed dangerous from her perspective. Because think about it. She just came back from wherever at 3 a.m. No one is in the hallways. And I come right after her. Meaning that by the split time where she has to spend time by herself before the elevator gets here, I'm there and I enter. The first thing that crossed her mind was, oh, that guy followed me. That guy came into the building with me because that timing is way too fucking convenient. And also she thought, oh, if I have to take the elevator, I'm going to be stuck with him in that very small space, and he's bigger than me because I'm 6 feet. And back then I wasn't as big as I am right now, but I could have easily overpowered her in a close quarter. All of these things flashed through her brain in 0.5 seconds the second she saw me. It took me a few days to understand all of that. That is also an asymmetry in psychology. The fact that as a man, I just couldn't get it. I couldn't get why she was so petrified of me. And back then, I had enough sensibility to understand that she didn't want me to go into the elevator with her, so I waited. I didn't say a thing, and she was so afraid she couldn't speak. The second the elevator opened, she rushed in and she pressed the button for it to leave. And actually, again, I could be mad at this and say, well, I'm a good guy. You're a good guy, but you're also a creature, and you're also a monster. And considering the fact that women also get killed by men that they trust, is it so strange that they are not able to trust strangers? That is vital to understand, because the distrust that women have for us is not something that they find fun. It's not something that they enjoy. If they could trust us across the board 100%, they would. But they can't. It's a survival mechanism that they had to put in place to be able to just live a normal life. It's something that they had to develop. And again, this is not something that they're born with. It's something that every woman develops and works on as they get older, because the second they reach puberty, and even sometimes sadly before that, they start having these interactions with men, and they learn because they're not stupid. So the next time a woman that you know, or a woman on the internet, complains about men, complains about how violent we are, instead of saying, I'm not like that, try to understand her perspective, because from her perspective, yes, you are like that. And the fact that you go out of your way to say it, in a sense, is you advocating for that violence, because you're trying to shut her down. You're trying to make her shut her mouth when she expresses her perspective and her experience. An experience that I've just demonstrated to you, you know nothing about. Because that fictional universe I painted for you is fictional. You don't actually have to live with it. Women have to live with it every single second of their life. As Margaret Atwood used to say, this above all, to refuse to be a victim. Oftentimes, men blame women because they're perpetual victims. They have this victim mentality. Well, guess what? They don't necessarily want to have it, but it's something that they had to espouse because of our behavior, and this trend of this viral question exemplifies this. By picking the bear over the man, women follow this principle. They try their best to not be put in a situation where they could be victimized, so as to not become the victim, because if they become the victim, they're going to be blamed for it. And this is actually an idea that is explained in details in Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear. If you are a woman and you're watching this video, please do yourself a favor, buy this book and read this book. It might save your life. And if you're a man, there are 2 passages from this book that I want to read to you to help you understand why women fear men more than they fear bears. So the first one is long, but you'll see that it's very interesting because it details the way a human predator goes about stalking and manipulating his prey, something that a bear would never be able to do. Warning, if you have been a victim of sexual assault, this paragraph contains mentions of it, so maybe skip to the next part. He had probably been watching her for a while. We aren't sure, but what we do know is that she was not his first victim. That afternoon, in an effort to get all her shopping done in one trip, Kelly had overestimated what she could comfortably carry home. Justifying her decision as she struggled with the heavy bags, she reminded herself that making 2 trips would have meant walking around after dark, and she was too careful about her safety for that. As she climbed a few steps to the apartment building door, she saw that it had been left unlatched again. Her neighbors just don't get it, she thought, and though their lack of security annoyed her, this time she was glad to be saved the trouble of getting out the key. She closed the door behind her, pushing it until she heard it latch. She is certain she locked it, which means he must have already been inside the corridor. Next came the 4 flights of stairs, which she wanted to do in one trip. Near the top of the 3rd landing, one of the bags gave way, tearing open and dispensing cans of cat food. They rolled down the stairs almost playfully, as if they were trying to get away from her. The can in the lead paused at the 2nd floor landing, and Kelly watched as it literally turned the corner, gaining some speed and begging its seemingly mindful hop down the next flight of steps and out of sight. "Got it, I'll bring it up," someone called out. Kelly didn't like that voice. Right from the start, something just sounded wrong to her. But then this friendly-looking young guy came bounding up the steps, collecting cans along the way. He said, "Let me give you a hand." No, thanks, I've got it." "You don't look like you've got it. What floor are you going to?" She paused before answering him. "The 4th, but I'm okay really." He wouldn't hear a word of it, and by this point he had a collection of cans balanced between his chest and one arm. "I'm going to the 4th floor too," he said, "and I'm late. Not my fault, broken watch. So let's not just stand here. And give me that." He reached out and tugged on one of the heavier bags she was holding. She repeated, "No really thanks, but I've got to go." Still holding onto the grocery bag, he said, "There's such a thing as being too proud, you know." For a moment, Kelly didn't let go of that bag, but then she did, and this seemingly insignificant exchange between the cordial stranger and the recipient of his courtesy was the signal, to him and to her, that she was willing to trust him. As the bag passed from her control to his, so did she. "We better hurry," he said as he walked up the stairs ahead of Kelly. "We've got a hungry cat up there." Even though he seemed to want nothing more at that moment than to be helpful, she was apprehensive about him, and for no good reason, she thought. He was friendly and gentlemanly, and she felt guilty about her suspicion. She didn't want to be the kind of person who distrusts everybody, so they were next approaching the door to her apartment. "Did you know a cat can live for 3 weeks without eating?" he asked. "I'll tell you how I learned that tidbit. I once forgot that I promised to feed a cat while a friend of mine was out of town." Kelly was now standing at the door to her apartment, which she just opened. "I'll take it from here," she said, hoping he'd hand her the groceries, accept her thanks, and be on his way. Instead he said, "Oh no, I didn't come this far to let you have another cat food spill." When she still hesitated to let him in the door, he laughed understandingly. "Hey, we can leave the door open like ladies do in old movies. I'll just put this stuff down and go. I promise." She did let him in, but he did not keep his promise. At this point, as she's telling me the story of the rape and the whole 3-hour ordeal she suffered, Kelly pauses to weep quietly. She now knows that he killed one of his other victims, stabbed her to death. All the while, since soon after we sat down knee to knee in the small garden outside my office, Kelly has been holding both my hands. She's 27 years old. Before the rape, she was a counselor for disturbed children, but she hasn't been back to work in a long while. That friendly-looking young man had caused 3 hours of suffering in her apartment and at least 3 months of suffering in her memory. The confidence he scarred off was still hiding. The dignity he pierced, still healing. So that's a small story of what happens when a woman tries to shut down her survival mechanisms by telling herself that she doesn't want to be rude to a stranger. Unfortunately, as De Becker points out, many women who get victimized think like this. They, on purpose, go out of their way to do something they know is dangerous, to adhere to social norms and to not be mean to a stranger or mean to a man, which results in them getting sometimes raped, sometimes killed. And as you see in that book, the guy knows this and he makes use of it. He expertly manipulates her into opening that door so that he can then come in and do whatever he wants to do to her. A bear would never be able to do that. A bear would not be that vicious. A bear would not have these resources. A bear would not be able to stalk you through the woods with the effectiveness that a man would. He would not want from you what a man would want from you. Because, and I know it's shocking to some of you guys who are men, many women would rather be killed by a bear than raped by a man. Because at least when you get killed, it's over quickly. You don't have to deal with the pain, the memory, the trauma, people blaming you for it, etc., etc. So that is the first passage. The second passage I want to read to you explains why women should consider every man a potential predator, because as you'll see, it only takes being wrong one time to die. A woman in an underground parking lot is approached by a stranger who offers help loading groceries into her car. She could refine her predictions about the man and enjoy a creative exercise by asking herself, is this man A member of a citizen volunteer group whose mission is to patrol underground parking lots in search of women to help? B, the owner of a supermarket chain looking for the star of his next national advertising campaign? Or C, a guy who has some sexual interest in me? By the time you consciously develop even the first possible category for your multiple choice list, you likely already know the correct answer and you have already considered the level of immediate hazard intuitively. Intuition, remember, knows more about the situation than we are consciously aware of. In the parking lot, it knows when the woman first saw that man, as opposed to when she first registered seeing him. It may know when he first saw her, it may know how many other people are around. It knows about the lighting, about how sound carries here, about her ability to escape or defend herself, should she need to, and on and on and on. Very interesting as well. Here, De Becker points out that instinct, female instinct that is highly developed, has developed itself in accordance to the level of predation that men impose on women. The reason why your instinct as a woman usually tells you to be wary of strange men and men in general is for a reason. It's because it was passed down through generations of women who survived. And they survived because they had that instinct. So if you shut it down to be nice, you're just being suicidal and it's entirely stupid. Another thing that's interesting here, the fact that he talks about the man potentially registering the woman before she sees him. If a man approaches you as a woman, this means that he's been stalking you at least to some degree because he saw you first and then he moved towards you. You become aware of his presence too late, so you have a disadvantage. Becoming specially aware of men is also therefore a great trait to possess, a trait that you might have noticed women have. As a guy, how many times have you been creeping on a girl, looking at a girl from behind, maybe her ass or whatever, and she turns around and she looks at you? She doesn't even scan the horizon or anything. Her head pivots and looks at you. What is this? It's instinct. She felt your stare. I don't think science is able to explain this, but it's something that I've personally perceived, and maybe you can corroborate that this is a truth. Where is this coming from? It's coming from instinct. So this second paragraph is very important as well, but it's only one of the few because this book is really a goldmine. And what I want you to keep in mind, both men and women, is the fact, while instinct and intuition are there to protect you, unfortunately women are also socially engineered to be kind to men by default, and unlike what a lot of people might think or believe, this actually increases the likelihood of being victimized because it robs you of your most precious weapon. And as such, as a woman, the best way to never become a victim is to hold a steady feeling of distrust towards men, which, while sad, is also absolutely necessary. And the only type of people who get to not develop that distrust are the people who end up being the target of it, meaning men. If we're going to talk about privilege, yes, being unaware and oblivious to all of these factors and all of these mechanisms of survival is a male privilege because we don't need it to survive. And I'm not claiming that men are the only ones being privileged. Women also are in their own way. So for example, women being mostly oblivious to social loneliness because they always have safety nets and people who care about them, that is a female privilege. It's something that males don't have, but we're not here to talk about that. Now, the one thing that is not present in the excerpts I just read to you is the fact that, as I said at the start, statistically, most women get attacked by someone that they know. And that is also a key difference between man and bear. If a bear attacks you and you manage to repel it, it's not going to follow you home to try again. But if you do that to a man, if you reject a man, or if you date a guy and you break up, chances are that guy is most likely going to have a negative reaction, and if he does, he knows exactly where to get you. Which points to an interesting difference also between the type of exes that men and women have. Most men complain about crazy ex-girlfriends, and I've had crazy ex-girlfriends. But for the majority of the time, what these women tend to do is they spread bullshit about you, so they claim you have a small dick or you don't know how to fuck. But that's the extent of it, right? They try to go after your reputation because they cannot impact you physically. And of course, the manipulation and the psychological attacks take a toll and it's shitty. But if you compare it to women, go talk to the women in your lives. Most likely they had at least one stalker ex. One guy that they loved, that they cared about and trust, that when they broke up, that dude turned out psycho, and that can lead to months and months of someone knocking on your door, waiting outside your apartment, which is, in my opinion, much, much worse. And that's part of that psychological profile I was talking about, because with a bear, you're going to be on your guard all the time, but with a man, especially a man that you trust and that you love, you are going to lower your guard. That is only logical. And that might get you hurt, which is why so many women have trust issues, because they've been betrayed in the past. And that is not limited to romantic relationships. Unfortunately, many women also get victimized by family figures, by fathers, by cousins, by brothers, by uncles. That leaves a mark, it leaves a trauma, and that trauma colors the rest of their existence because now they're going to have a very tough time opening up or trusting another man, and this is an handicap, it's a baggage because it's not making their life easy. It's not something that they enjoy. If they could do without it, they would. And that's a reality that women have to live with because unless they decide one day to genocide all men, it's never going to change. And this is when I'm going to add a third factor to the thought experiment I wanted you to make. Now, imagine that on top of that third sex being stronger and bigger, on top of them being sexually attracted to you, you also have to add the fact that you are also attracted to them. So now you have to deal with this paradox. You are attracted to the thing that is the most dangerous to you. This is why women pick bear. Women are not sexually attracted towards bear. So the chances of them falling in love with the bear and trusting the bear and then being killed by it is 0%. But with a man, we've seen that the stats show it's the majority of the situations. Once you have that in mind, it's not so surprising that so many women make "I wish I was a lesbian" joke. They don't really wish it. They don't really wish they liked women. Instead, they wish they didn't like us. It's a covert way to express a form of despair that is socially unacceptable to express because when women are upfront about the way they feel about us, about men, they get attacked. And this is why I wanted to make this video, because most likely if the same message was conveyed by a feminist, a woman, or God forbid, a male feminist with bitch tits, you would dismiss it. You would just ignore it on the basis of the person who is sharing the message. But because I'm a muscular, masculine dude, I hope that it's going to allow you to take in the information I shared with you. Because you won't be able to dismiss all of my arguments as being emotional, like so many guys like to do when women talk about their experience. And the fact that these very same women are now more and more keen to express the way they feel, and to express their heterofatalism, the fact that unfortunately they love us but they can't trust us and it's killing them, that's not something to freak out over. It's not something to get mad at. It's a positive thing. On perce l'abcès, as we say in French. We are revealing to the surface and to the light a situation that is being left untouched because it's a taboo. It makes people uncomfortable. When something makes people uncomfortable, it usually means that it's a subject that needs to be tackled and quick. Which is why I personally don't get mad when I see trends like this. Because the only thing I can see and perceive is a cry for help. It's a cry for help from women who are interested in loving us, but who intuitively understand that it might not be worth the risk. And the only people who can skew the balance and make it less risky for them, it's us. They don't have that agency. And that is the nature of a cry for help. When you are crying for help, it means that you cannot help yourself. And how did men react? Not all men, but a good chunk of them, with anger. The one trait that women are telling you makes you dangerous, makes them unable to express the way they feel. When they finally got off their way to be truthful, you get even more angry. And then these very same dudes are going to turn around and say, oh, I don't understand, I can't date, I can't get married, the dating scene is dead. You killed it. You killed it with your emotional immaturity and inability to take in criticism. And as I explained, it doesn't matter if you're not one of these men. What matters is that there are men out there like this, many, and that you are indistinguishable from them. So if you want to be able to stand out, you have to show it with your behavior. When you get angry at women who speak their truth, they're going to put you in the same basket because, frankly, you possess all of the characteristics of the type of man who would be dangerous to them. Now, as I said, the issue of violence against women isn't going anywhere. But if you're the type of man who is interested in bridging the divide, if you're the type of man who is interested in providing women with a safe and loving environment for them to thrive, then your goal should be to improve the trust that women have in us. And I think that with all of the information and perspective that I provided in this video, you have all of the tools at your disposal to do that. But maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you have already written off women and you are going to spend the rest of your life celibate because you believe that they're all evil and they all hate men for some reason, which is ironical because in that sense, it means that you also picked the bear. You also have made the decision to write off the other sex because you consider that spending time with them or sharing a life with them even simply isn't worth it. But I want you to remember one thing. The one difference between women picking the bear and you picking the bear is that in their case, their choice was motivated by fear and your choice was motivated by resentment, which also sums up heterosexual dynamics quite nicely if I say so myself. And that is going to be the end of this video, which unsurprisingly was 3 times longer than I expected because I always lose myself in tangents. So let me know how you think, what you think, if you're a man, if you're a woman. As always, the comments are wide open. If you're being a twat, I will not delete your comments because I believe in absolute freedom of speech. That being said, if you get clowned for being a clown, don't come complain to me. If you enjoyed this segment and you like this type of discussion, you can also consider supporting the channel on my Ko-fi page. First link in the description. Any donations or monthly pledges are welcome because it allows me to take the time to write, to record, and to edit these very long videos. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.